you're doing a holy thing.
It's going to be one of those weeks, I think. It's all right. I think you'll have to move my message in there. I think it got moved out. It's real people. See, we're outward focused. I mean, real people was last week. So I'm going to give you the same message twice. So Elwood Blues put it best, I think, we're on a mission from God. I shared the video the first time in our Tuesday night service a couple weeks ago, and it just happened to be that our two older couples weren't able to be here, so I was then the oldest one in the room, and no one had a clue of who Elwood Blues or Blues Brothers were. So if you're here and you don't know them, that's okay. I grew up in a very musical family, so I've seen those movies probably more than I should have, probably younger than I should have. But the premise of the movie is they're on a mission from God, and that's what we are. All of us are on a mission from God. Whether you're Asher or you're not Asher, you're on the opposite end of spectrum, you're very young or very old, we're all on a mission. We all have a purpose, we all have something we can do, we're all capable of being a part of the mission for God. So for us as a church, part of our mission and part of where our church name came from was Ephesians 2:19. And that is, so now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens. You see I made citizens big for a reason. Along with all of God's holy people, you are members of God's family. For me and Kristen, this was our calling verse. I prayed a prayer telling God, if you want me to plant a church, because we were trying to find the path for us, if you want me to plant a church, you will give us a unique name. There's already a Nazarene church here in town. I didn't want to be Second Nazarene. I didn't want to be named after the street we were on. Not because of any of those are bad, but this was my fleece. You'll give us a name. So you would think I prayed this prayer and then, kind of like Gideon, I prayed the prayer the next night. This is what the fleece says. No, 6 months later, in my Bible reading, I'm reading Ephesians chapter 2 in this verse, and I literally hadn't prayed this prayer in a couple months, if not a few months. And God says, that's the name of your church. Oh, okay. So, I text Kristen, like she's not home. I think she was at work that night. And, as excited as you can be through text, like, hey, this is what it is. Cool. I think that's probably the response I got. Like, cool. Now then it's like, well, what does that mean? We live in Bolivar. We're still called to Branson. So this verse means a lot to us. It was one of the many answers God gave us along the way. But for us, the reason citizens was so important is that we want a church to be more than what church of the past or church of the future may or may not have been. We want a church to actually be more of home and be more family like it was originally intended to be. When you look at the Bible, you can see what Jesus and his disciples in the early church was that it was a community together. They lived together, they shared each other's burdens, they helped each other, they cared for each other. Where for us in churches we had been in previously, that wasn't always the case. So we're members, all members of God's family. We're no longer foreigners, we're no longer strangers, but we're all citizens along with God's holy people. So our citizenship's there, but we're members of God's family. Do we realize the significance of that last sentence? You are members of God's family. So once we accept Jesus, and Ashley's going to help me preach here. When we accept Jesus, we then become a member of God's family. We can share the inheritance, but then we're also brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters have a strange relationship, right? Like you're in one family, brothers and sisters compete, right? Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but no one picks on your sibling except for you. That's the rules. That's kind of how it was. It's like you stood up for each other. It's how it was when I was a kid. My sisters would mess with me because I have two older sisters, but no one else could. That's out of bounds. And when we're part of God's family, that's how it should be for us. We should be able to look at our brothers and sisters inside our church and even outside of our church and say, let's come together, let's support each other, let's actually love each other. And if we can't love our own family, we're really not going to be able to love the people outside the doors. And in case you're not sure what role is, if you ever hear us mention that, that's real people, and it's even here. We are real people who are outward focused to love everyone with the goal of leading the world to Jesus. So, If you're not real sure on the family part, next week will be a fun one for you, because it's not just a love the family, it's not just a love these people, but it's loving everyone. Because we felt these were important. Last week we focused on being real people. Being real is the opposite of being fake. Real is authentic. This is who I am, this is where I am, this is how I talk, this is how I dress, this is, however, it doesn't mean we don't have different versions of ourselves sometimes where, if I go to work and I'm traveling for work and I have to go to an office, I have to put on a suit, or I have to put on at least slacks and a tie, because that's our dress code. That doesn't mean I'm not being authentic. That means I'm following the rules that I'm supposed to go by. So there are times when rules do accept our authenticity. If it were up to me, I'd probably be fine preaching in shorts and a t-shirt and a hat. It wouldn't bother me, but I know that it would bother others, especially the hat part. That's a really big deal for a lot of people. But then today, with outward focus, the reason we focus outward is because it's not because our family's not here. I know it seems contradictory. 2:19, we're citizens of the kingdom of God. We share that inheritance. We're no longer foreigners and strangers. We're all part of God's family, but then we're going to focus outward instead of inward. The reason is when we focus inward as a church, if you've ever been in a church that focuses inward, usually a few things happen. One, you care about everything inside a lot more than things outside. So you ever been in a church that argues about the color of the carpet, or what color the concrete floor is in our case, and the chairs, and the walls, and this decoration or that decoration? I have literally been in a board meeting arguing about what toilet paper to buy. I'm not exaggerating. And let's be honest, sometimes that can be important. I'm not going to say it's not, that can be important. Buy the nice stuff. But when we focus inward, that's when internal wars happen. That's when we're drawing lines, we're saying this is more important than that. I think if we look at the life of Jesus, though, and if you look at the life of the apostles, where was their focus? It was out. They went out to the community, they were part of where they were, they traveled, they went. Jesus, very rarely did he tell people, come to me. He told people to follow him, to be his disciples. But you know what you don't have to do? You don't have to follow people who are stationary. Right? I mean, if you're in a room, like right now, you might have to follow me with your eyes because I don't stand still very well, but you're not following me as we're standing here, right? I don't move. You don't have to follow me anywhere. If I go outside and I keep moving, you have to follow. And Jesus said, follow me. It wasn't be with me. And I think sometimes when we think of inward focus versus outward, it's the difference between following and being with. Because you can be with someone in a house, in a room, in a place, and you can even be with someone when you're following them. But you can't be with someone and not follow them. That's not the context that Jesus wanted. He wasn't saying, just be with me, be in my presence, just be here and hope to be here. He said, come in and go out. And that's part of the last thing, is the going out. So that's who we are as a church, as part of our identity. And honestly, if we're really, really honest, this is how we would hope all Christians would act. We want them to be real. We want them to care about other people. We want them to love everyone, no matter background, race, color. We're not going to want to go into a church that's, racist or doesn't like people that wear this color. That is absurd to us. We want to love everyone, no matter where they are, no matter what background. And we want to have the goal of leading the world to Jesus. Because if we're in church, our ultimate goal has to be leading people to Jesus. Because if I'm leading you to me, we're all going to fail. You can follow actions that we do, you can see steps, but if I'm leading you to me, that's not the goal. The goal is leading everyone to Jesus and pointing them to Jesus. So that's the focus of that. It's the focus of who we are, and that's what we're talking about through this series. Today's scripture is in Colossians 4, 2 through 6. And I love this scripture. Verses 5 and 6 specifically are what we're looking at. And I will go ahead and I will preface that today's message will be slightly different than a lot of messages I've done. And I did that on purpose, so hopefully you'll like it. But Colossians, this letter is written while Paul is in prison. He references it multiple times. This is the last chapter of Colossians. If you're looking for it in your Bible, it's beyond Philippians and Ephesians. It's back past all of those, and that's where it is. It's just 4 chapters. But he wrote this while he's in prison. So think of the words that he's using. And he's literally writing them behind bars in prison. And actually, he's chained, so he's telling someone else what to say because he can't physically write it himself. So let's go ahead and begin. In verse 2, it says, "Devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with an attitude of thanksgiving." Being outward focused ends in prayer. Because you'll never think outside of yourself if we don't go to God first. And it's an attitude of thanksgiving. He's in jail, and he's talking about have an attitude of thanksgiving. Like, if I'm in jail because of something for preaching Jesus, I'm probably not going to be sitting there thinking, I want them all to have an attitude of thanksgiving. We need an attitude of revenge. We need to get back at these people. But no, that's my flesh wanting to talk. But keep alert in an attitude of thanksgiving. Be thankful. Verse 3 and 4, pray at the same time for us as well, that God will open to us a door for the word, so that we may speak forth the mystery of Christ, for which I have also been imprisoned. There's his imprisonment again. That I may make it clear in the way I ought to speak. In verse 5 and 6, the key verses, conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. Before we go into a few of the other things and other questions I want to ask, the wisdom that he's talking about, this is not a normal wisdom that he's talking about. It's not just be smart about how to deal with outsiders, but he's actually saying that he's talking about conduct yourself with godly wisdom towards outsiders. Make the most of the opportunity. It's the opportunity to share God with them. Conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders. Share the right opportunity. Share with them what you can. But let your speech always be with grace. And the grace he's talking about is a heavenly grace. It's, God's grace that he has given us. That's that grace that says, no matter how many times you mess up, you can be forgiven. That's the grace he's talking about. And then he says, as though seasoned with salt. This phrase means absolutely nothing to our time frame, but it's actually a normal phrase for that time. And so seasoned with salt. Does anyone know what it means? Anyone experience that? Anyone say this in their normal speech? Go out and talk to people as though you were seasoned with salt. Because most of them are like, well, it's too salty, it's not salty enough. And that's part of it. But salt during this time, and it still is today, like if you eat beef jerky, it's cured with salt. Salt is how they actually got to preserve meats so they could use it. Salt's also used for flavor. Salt's also used for about everything they did back then. It was used for healing properties. It was used for so many different things. So he's telling them, as though seasoned with salt, be cured, be persevered, be preserved, be ready for whatever task is at hand. So let your speech always be with grace, as though you're seasoned with salt. Another thing that I kind of noticed, anyone else eat beef jerky? I love beef jerky. Kristen does not, I do. Beef jerky and regular meat have a totally different texture. Or cured meat and uncured meat do too. If you've ever noticed, cured meat can handle a lot more abuse than uncured meat. If it has no salt, it's kind of finicky. Like they even sell hot dogs that are cured and uncured. And I can bet you the cured hot dog will last for years probably, longer than an uncured hot dog. The difference is the salt. For us, if we're not taking the grace, we're not being seasoned through God's grace, it's hard to give grace out. If we are not ready, we're not in a place where we can say, I've been seasoned, I can give seasoning to others. If you can't persevere through something if you haven't received it sometimes. So if we haven't received the grace, we're not being able to share God's grace, it's really hard to speak with grace. Because when we're talking with outsiders, people that don't know, there are a lot of these words that don't make sense to them. Does anyone remember the very first time they ever came into church? Like, I kind of grew up in church, so a lot of those phrases are kind of normal to me. But you ever be around people that use those same phrases like in everyday life? So like you're on a phone call with somebody and you say something to them like, amen, or they say, that's kind of their agreement. Like, you catch those out. That's my family. My family's those people that use it all the time. So like for me, even not being in church, I heard all of these phrases. But people that have not been around church or have not been around American culture in church, these words don't make sense. So when we talk about grace and we talk about those things, grace is a name to our culture. Like it's not this place of peace, it's not a place of mercy. So when we're talking about letting it always be with grace, it's kindness, if we want to put it into terms. It's peacefulness. It's patience. All of those things are inside of grace. So when we're talking with others, are we using it as a way to be graceful to them? Are we being kind? Are we being passionate? Are we being understanding? Because a lot of times, if you're like me, I catch myself and I have to stop. The words that come to me initially are not always the words filled with grace. And I have to work on that break between what comes into my head and what comes out of my mouth. So when we're talking with us, it has to be with grace. So there's a few things I want to share, and I want to start with this question. Who was and when was the last time you invited someone to church or a church event? I even gave you a little blank if you have the papers, and you can fill this in if you can remember. If you can't, that's okay. But who was and when was the last time you invited someone to church or a church event? The reason is being outward focused, is being outward, being with the community, but it's also talking about Jesus with them. We can be outward and we can be out in the community. For me, like I like cars, so I hang out with other car people. And if I was with them and they didn't know I was a pastor, and it wasn't with Caleb and some of those people that have been in our church and who go to our church on a regular basis, if I weren't with them, would my words reflect who I am? So it's the same with you. If you go to church on a regular basis, you consider yourself a Christian, you're a church member, any of those things, where our words reflect it. So when was the last time we invited someone to church? The reason it's important is I want to share several statistics with you that are kind of shocking. They're really kind of shocking. It's the best thing I can give you for it. So if you want to, and you like writing these down, you can. You'll have space in the bottom, space on the back if you want. The first thing I want to share is a misconception. There's a couple. 69% of churchgoers believe that everyone will go to heaven. This is as in everyone. 69% of churchgoers. This isn't 69% of Americans. This isn't 69% of people that, don't know anything about church. This is 69% of churchgoers. To be a churchgoer, you are in regular attendance at least once a month. That's what they consider regular attendance. 69% of churchgoers believe that everyone will go to heaven. There's a lot of scripture that says that's not true. Second misconception, I'll give a scriptural point for this. 30% of all Americans believe after they die, God will give them a second chance. All Americans. Part of the reason of being outward focused is that so we can spread truth. I labeled these as misconceptions because this is a sad misconception. Because 69% of us believing, more than two-thirds of churchgoers believing everyone will go to heaven, and then another almost third of all Americans believing that after we die, we get a second chance. Because if you get a second chance and everyone has a second chance when we die, what is the point of following God here? Like let's be honest. If these two-thirds of people are right, why are any of us in here right now? It's a nice day, it's got a light breeze, it's not really hot. There are 3 lakes within 15 minutes, and I can think of barbecuing and things that we could be doing instead of talking about God and being in God's church if everyone will go, no matter what. No matter what we do. This also, I'm just going to say this, This also would include people like Hitler and Stalin and very wicked, evil people. If everyone will go to heaven, that means even the worst of the worst people that you can imagine would be part of everyone. Like, there's no exclusion. And I don't believe that. Scripturally, John 14:6 said, all three of the quotes I will share are from Jesus, because I believe that should show the importance of what he says. Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If there is one God, which we believe there is one God, there is one Jesus, there is one Holy Spirit, there is one heaven. No one can come to the Father except through me. So no one can go to the Father who is where? Let's say this out loud. Where's the Father? It's heaven, right? Heaven. So Father's in heaven. No one comes to the Father except through me. That means no one can go to heaven except through Jesus. That's accepting Jesus. That's believing in Jesus. That's pursuing Jesus. He's the way to God. He is the truth. He's not a lie. He's not hiding anything. But he is also the life. The life giver. That's the eternal life giver. That's the now life giver. There are things that people are unable to maybe communicate, that maybe they're unable to make this submission. Kids that die, like I had an uncle or great uncle, I guess, who died as a young child. He obviously would not be at the age of understanding. He would not have to make a confession. There are people that do not have understanding. There are things that go around this, but specifically for 99% of us that are adults and we have lived and all those things, the only way to heaven is through Jesus. I know it's kind of hard sometimes, but I just want to be very clear. There is not any other way. Like, you can't be like a really good person and go to heaven. Like, I know people who would stop and help anyone. I know people who would probably help more people than any of us in this room, and they're not Christian. That means that they would not go to heaven. God's not going to be like, hey, you're a really good dude, so I'm going to let you in anyway. Like, there's not like this like back door that you can sneak in. Like, there is one way, one truth, one life. So a few other things. Like, I have several of these. There's one of these that bothers me the most, and I will probably talk about it. So be prepared. Here's a fact for you, though. A Christian is killed for their faith every 6 minutes somewhere in the world. What time is it? Anyone got time? 11:20. What? 11:47. 11:47? All right, so it's 11:47. That means since church has started, in 13 minutes, 8 people have died for being a Christian in the world. By the time it's noon, it'll be 10 people. By the time we're gone, because most of us usually are here for a little bit, it'll be probably 12 people, maybe 13 people have died since 11 o'clock for being a Christian somewhere in the world. Like, I want to share this because if we're talking about outward, it goes beyond Branson too. There are people all over the world, people all over, who are actually being killed for being Christians. And in those countries, you actually can hear stories of some of the greatest things happening, because when they convert to Christianity, it's not a save me from hell, it's a seeking of Jesus experience. Those people, because like for them, it's life or death. Like, if you live in a Muslim country and you become a Christian, it is your father's responsibility, and your brother's, if your father is dead, to murder you for becoming a Christian. That's why 6 people, or that's why someone is dying every 6 minutes. It's not something that we should overlook because we have freedom of religion here. But it's something we should understand and know that it's a gift for us, but what do we do with it? Is our freedom of religion become something that is just perceived and okay? So a few things that go with that. Sad truth. This is going to be about kids and teenagers. Only half of all teenagers who grew up in a Christian home had regular conversations about God. This was a 13-year study. This wasn't one that they did like 6 months. So 13 years covers a lot of people. I would have been a teenager in those years, and several other people would have been too. Only half. Half. Like 50%. Like, in this room, 2 teenagers. Half of them would have had a conversation about God in their Christian home on a regular basis. If there's anywhere and any responsibility, and as a former youth pastor, because I used to have people come to me and say, hey, they're doing this. It's like, this is going on in their life. You need to fix them. Here's your hour for the week. Fix them. And sometimes, we do everything we can, and sometimes we get more. But the other 172 hours in the week, something like that they have, 170 plus are spent with their parents versus 2 at church. Who has the greater influence and advantage with them? Having a regular conversation. That doesn't mean you have to sit down and say, do you know Jesus? It's just talking about God. Like a regular conversation. Like, I still can't go to either of my grandparents' house and not end up somewhere talking about the Bible. Like, that's just normal conversation. And it's something as Asher gets older, I want to make sure that we have regular conversations about God and not just regular conversations about football or what's going on in school, but what are we learning in the Bible? It's a sad truth. Second sad truth. 31% of all young adults, which I'm still in this class for a few months, who had grown up in church have left the church because it was boring. This is actually from a book, Why Young Christians Are Leaving the Church. This actually comes from a very deep, much deeper issue, and it comes from our culture. Almost a third of young adults who've grown up in church have left the church because it was boring. The reason is church is entertainment versus church being a place to come and worship and know God. As long as church stays entertainment, it stays as a place where we come and, we're entertained. I mean, let's be honest. If we view church as entertainment, there are a few things that compete for it on Sundays. I can think of one big one that starts here in about a month. I mean, let's be honest. If we're going for entertainment value, we need like pyrotechnics and we need like dancers probably or something. I don't know, like something to liven it up. Like it needs to be more exciting, right? If we're going for entertainment. Do you think that's what Jesus had in mind when he said, go? Or do you think that's what Paul was talking about? He said, be grace when you speak with outsiders. No. But for us, if we're in the church and we haven't taught anyone, including teenagers and kids, that church isn't about us. It's not about coming and being entertained. People leave. The other surprising statistic that I found that I didn't share, that I'll go ahead and share in this, 1/3 of all church attenders come to church out of obligation. And this is why people leave the church, because it's boring. Because it's obligation. It's not anything more. It's not about God. It's just, we're coming to church because it's what we're supposed to do. Another one, 93% of practicing Christians aren't comfortable, this is one that bothers me, aren't comfortable to have a conversation about the Lord with their own grandchildren. This is a study from last year. I know I have a few grandparents in here, so I don't want to step on any toes. But if you're part of the 93% that you can't have a conversation with your own grandkid about Jesus, talk to me so I can help you. Because there is no one that has more influence on a kid's life than their own grandparent. And I believe that. Because who spoils grandkids, right? Like Asher Asher is the only grandkid on Kristen's side. So Asher's getting all of the attention, all of the love, everything he wants, and he will grow up as always being the oldest grandkid on their side. But if we can't have conversations about Jesus with our own kids, or with our own grandkids, then how are we ever going to have conversations about Jesus with strangers? With people who do not know us. And I don't know where my slides went. There they go. I still had it back there. So if that's you, if you fall in this group, talk to me. I will do anything I can to help. If you need resources, what to say. Because here's the thing. It doesn't mean you force it on them. Doesn't mean you shove it down throats, anything like that. But just talking about Jesus. Oh, I'm so happy this happened, or this is what happened at church, or this is what's going on. Not even those conversations, 93% of practicing. And I love that it's practicing Christians, because that's actually a different group than church attenders. Church attenders is once a month. Practicing Christians is people that are there on a regular basis, even more so. Like, it's 2 to 3 times to 4 times a month. It's the people who consider themselves, I am a fully devout, practicing Christian, and I can't talk to my grandkids about Jesus because, well, what if they get mad at me? Or what if they do this? Or what if they do that? Kids will get mad at their parents. I'm going to be honest, that will happen. I honestly don't know how often I've ever got mad at my grandparents. Even when I've been in the corner, even when I've been in trouble, even when I've been spanked, I never really got that mad. Like, most of the time, for one, I knew I deserved it. But we have to be willing to have this conversation. Like, out of all of these statistics, this one bothers me the most. Because there's supposed to be no one that loves someone's grandkid like their own grandparent. And if we believe what some of the stats that come after this, then we have to be willing to share it. So John 20:21, and again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you, as the Father sent me, so I'm sending you." Jesus was sent by God, and he's sending us. Jesus was sent to save people, to lead people to himself, to lead people to God, and that's what he's sending us to do. Short, simple, think we get it. That's where we're going. Here's a few hard truths. 70% of those attending church 1 or more times a month never share their faith with a stranger. See that never there? That's a never in your life share their faith with a stranger. That doesn't mean, here's this card. That's just, I believe in Jesus. Here's why I believe in Jesus. 70%, 2/3. Another hard truth, 70% of unchurched people have never been invited to church in their whole life. I put these back to back for a reason. Are you with me here? I'm not a mathematician. I do work with numbers on a regular basis. 70% of those attending church 1 or more time a month have never shared their faith with a stranger. 70% of unchurched people have never been invited to church in their whole lives. Do I need to do it again? 70%. 70%. Do you think there's a correlation why 70% of unchurched people have never been invited to church in their whole lives if 70% of those attending church have never shared their faith with a stranger? Because there's one thing that has always bothered me about Christian culture, and that's this. Christians hang out with who? Christians. So, by process of elimination, we're never able to share our faith with strangers because we only hang out with Christians. So, like, we're at our kids' basketball games. We hang out with the other church-going parents instead of the ones who drink on the weekends. We hang out with these people instead of these people. We do it with these people instead of these people. Well, I don't want my kids to have bad influences, or I don't want them to have this. Well, I'm going to tell you something. If your kids go to public school, if they go to Christian school, even if they're homeschooled, there's bad influences everywhere. Everywhere. Like, literally everywhere. Turn on the TV, and buy one of those boxes if you want. They bleeps out language, and they're actually really fun. Because you're going to realize how often that box goes boop or bleep, whatever you set it as, or it changes the word to tootie or whatever you want. But if you buy one of those, you will see how much is on TV. So if we are Christians, we are called to be outward, we are called to go out, and we see it in Colossians, we see it from words from Jesus. This number should not be there. If that number wasn't as high as that one was, this number wouldn't be as high as this one is. Now, you want to know the saddest truth of them all? Of this set right here? 82% of the unchurched are at least somewhat likely to attend church if invited. Somewhat likely. The reason it's labeled as this is because if you're filling out a pamphlet, you're filling out a survey, are you unlikely, likely, somewhat likely, not likely, or never likely to go to church? So 82% of people said, yeah, I'd at least somewhat likely be willing to go if I was invited. 82%. That's more than 4 out of 5 people. The number one reason most people don't want to invite people to church is because they'll say no. Most people, and I've invited a lot of people to church, and I will admit, I've had a few who got really irate. I'll be honest, I have. But the majority of people, even those that have never been to church, you know what they're usually like? Oh, okay, cool. Like, that's the whole conversation. Hey, you'd like to come check out a church sometime? here's one of our invite cards, or here's one of my business cards, call me if you need me, whatever I give them, depending on the conversation we had. Oh, cool, I'll have to come check you guys out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we can't live off of, well, they never will, so there's no reason to invite, because what about when they do? What about when they will? Because 82%, and it doesn't mean that 82% are somewhat likely to come this Sunday. Sometimes it's planting seeds. The parable of the sower, they plant seeds, it basically throws them out. Some of them grow quick, some of them take time, some of them, never comes at all. It's the same for us when we invite people to church. Sometimes they come really quick, and sometimes they stay, or sometimes they come really quick and they leave just as fast. Sometimes they never come at all, and sometimes they don't come immediately, but later they do come and they may stay longer. But if 82% of unchurched people are at least somewhat likely to attend church if invited, how many of us would feel more comfortable inviting people to church knowing that number? Anybody? Nobody feels more comfortable? Like, yeah, maybe a little bit. But the amount of people who would say outright no is probably not even 18%. Because most of those people are like, probably not. It's not a never for most of those. The never is single-digit percentages. The never people are the ones that are more likely to chew you out for inviting them to church. I will never go to church because of this, and this. And honestly, I've had great conversation with some of those people. I really have. And I like to debate things, so for me, I like getting in those conversations where I can talk and discuss and understand their point of view. Not berate them, but hell, that's cool what you believe. Like when I worked at T-Mobile, I worked with the guy who was Muslim. I read the Quran. He read the Bible. That was our agreement. He read the New Testament, I read the Quran, and we talked about it, and Jesus is in the Quran. And it's a different Jesus. It's the same person, but different parts of him. So they already believe in Jesus, so there's already footwork there. And you know what I got to do by having conversation, being willing to get out of my comfort zone? I was able to talk to him about Jesus, and he's actually a Christian now. Not because of my direct doing, but because of where seeds started and where they went over time. But when I was talking to him, it's okay, so Jesus, because they believe Jesus is a prophet. They don't believe he is the Son of God. If you're not familiar with the Muslim religion, if you're not familiar with Islam, they believe he's a prophet, not the Son of God. But Jesus in the New Testament multiple times says he is what? The Son of God. So it's either he is a crazy liar, Jesus is a liar, because he says, I am the Son of God, or he is the Son of God. You can't be a prophet of God and be a liar, I don't think. Anyone think that? You want a pastor that gets up here and lies every week? You don't, right? Jesus himself cannot say, I'm a prophet, and be an amazing prophet if he is a liar. I'm willing to have that conversation. 82% of unchurched people, they're willing to have that conversation. So we have to invite. We have to go out. We have to talk.